Thank you, Shannon. Hey, thanks for running a great burn, boss.
Yeah, no problem.
Can we give him a round of applause? All the guys who ran that worked so well.
Yep.
So pleased, and take it away. Thank you.
So we did have a successful burn today, and why did we have a successful burn? A lot of planning goes into it to make sure that the conditions are right, that you have the people, that you've planned for everything that could or can happen, and to make this thing successful. So the document that we used for planning is called a burn plan. And basically the burn plan is covering the who, what, when, where, why, how, and a little bit of what if for your planning. And so why do we put all the planning in it? To be successful. Second, because it's law. The Maryland Department of Natural Resources Forest Service is the agency responsible for regulating open air burning and the laws that are there for resource protection. So it's protection of natural resources from fire. So as part of our law, there are stipulations on when you need a burning permit, when you don't need a burning permit, and then when you need a burn plan and when you don't need a burn plan. So by law, you can burn under an acre without a burn plan, but you still need to get the burning permit. And a burning permit is just a document we give to folks that are going to burn brush or whatever they're trying to burn that is legal to be burned in their backyard. And basically we're saying that they need 10 feet of clearance around it. They need to have somebody responsible with it. They have to have tools and equipment from keeping the fire escape and all that stuff. So if you're going to burn under an acre, you still have to follow all those rules. But at that point, you don't need a burn plan. Does that mean you shouldn't have one? Not in my opinion. If you're planning to do any sort of natural cover burn, broadcast burning, you should work with your county's Forestry Service office, and each county has an office that you can work with to get that burn plan, and they'll help you along the process. And moving forward, we'll talk about some. Did that go off, Luke? Oh, yep. And as we move along here, we'll talk more about the requirements for being part of the plan as a burn boss. So legally, you need a burn plan if you're going to burn over an acre. What's that?
Which department is the county office?
Department of Natural Resources Forest Service is the agency, and each county has a forestry office. If you go to our website, Department of Natural Resource, and under Forest, there's contact information for each project office. So why else all the planning? Liability. You're putting fire on the ground. You're fire by nature, and when you need to use fire during fire season, it can get out of control. So the liability end of that, you need to make sure that everything has been covered and that you're burning when you should be and how you should be. So the plan covers all that. So our burn plan recently was updated. The previous version was 2010, and the current version just came out in January. And as technology progresses, the need for an update was there. And as more and more people were starting to burn, as an agency, we're responsible to make sure that the people that are burning have covered all their bases and burning as safely as possible. So we added some stuff, we streamlined some stuff to make it a better document. And before it was a 3-page document, and now we're up to 5 pages with some attachments. But compared to other agencies that when they submit burn plans, they're pretty substantial and thick and pretty complicated. Not to say that ours isn't complicated. You still need to know as we go through this, we'll just scratch the surface on the elements, but you still need to thoroughly understand the elements of the burn plan. So basically, you know, we don't want to give you the keys to a vehicle that you don't quite know how to drive. So the burn plan, when you write the burn plan and submit the burn plan, or we're working with you for the burn plan, you know, we're getting an idea, you know, are you speaking the language? Is everything look right to us before we'll approve the burn plan? And do you have somebody qualified to lead that burn? And we'll talk about that a bit more. So just go through the burn plan itself. The first part of it, the first element is the burn plan number. Let's see where the pointer is on this. Oh shit. The burn plan number goes there, and when it's approved, a number will be assigned to it. That's the number of that plan for that year. Each one is individual. It helps us reference that. It helps when you're reporting for us to reference what was burned. Who it was prepared by, submitted by, and approved by would be the fire manager. For eastern and southern regions, it would be me. For central and western regions, it would be Tim Cole. The next part is just for state land, just looking at, you know, their particular lands that require particular approval from the restoration ecologist with the Wildlife and Heritage Service. So that's a state land thing. If you are burning on state land and you're not sure if it's an ESA or not, you can contact myself and I'll help you through that process.
What does ESA stand for?
Environmentally sensitive area. Okay, so ownership, pretty basic. Where are you burning? You know, these are all drop down, the region, the county. Is it private land? Is it state land? The property owner. If there's a land manager that's writing the plan or managing the property, their information would go there, and latitude and longitude. Just basic information with the first element. So the purpose and objective. So the purpose, we have the most frequently used here. You just check box. You know, today we would have used warm season grass maintenance, wildlife habitat improvement would have been picked. Another purpose may have been training for the workshop. For us, sometimes we'll use training for our people. So those are the purpose of why you're burning. The objective is a specific reason for what you're trying to do with that fire. And we call it a SMART objective, meaning that it's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, relevant, and time bound. So we want to specifically know what you're planning to do with the fire. I'm trying to, you know, consume 100% of the grass. I'm trying to kill a certain percentage of the overstory trees. Specifically, what are you doing? So when you're done the burn, we can determine, was it successful or unsuccessful? The third element is the burn unit description. And this is new to this burn plan. Before, we just had one entry here, and now you can submit several different burn units, but we want a description of the burn unit. And then this has a little, when it's on the computer, you can just add lines here, and basically for each burn unit, you can have a separate line. So when we were burning our burns, the areas that have a fire line around it, that's a burn unit. So we burnt 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units today. And then under each of those units be the acreage, and then the fuel model. The fuel model we burned today was grass, could be understory, could be marsh. So it just depends. And there's a drop-down menu to help you select. So we want to know what the slope is, and you know, this is for statewide, so not super applicable here on the shore, but Western Maryland, pretty important. Aspect, I will say for aspect on flat ground, we usually use south. That's the driest slope, so the most applicable. And then percentage of the overall burn. So if you had a burn unit that was 50% grass and 50% timber, you would have it would be the same burn unit, but here it would be grass, and 50% of it was grass, and then another line, same burn unit number, understory, and percentage 50%. So that's just what that percentage of the burn means. Adjacent fuels, when we're looking at the plan, we want to know what's surrounding it. You know, it helps us understand, you know, what the risk is of burning there. Is it grass with grass beside it, which if it slops over, it's going to take off? Is it brush? Is it logging slash? So that's what that's for. And again, this is just showing you different burn units and numbered on a map there, and each one of those units are different fuel type, or some of them are the same, but just different units. So this is weather and fuel conditions. So we were talking about our prescription today, and this is really the parameters and the kind of the meat and potatoes of the conditions that you need to have to successfully do your burn. And with the amount of time we have here today, we don't really have time to do a deep dive into what each of these should be. You know, we could spend a week just talking about the parameters. But essentially, we want to know what the temperature is, and the wind speed, the wind direction, the humidity, how many days since last measurable rain, what's the drought index, and the fine dead fuel moistures, which the fine dead fuel moistures are the real fine, smaller fuels on the surface that are actually carrying that fire, the fine dead fuels. And then the 1 hour, or the 10-hour fuels and 100-hour fuels. So these are just the fine deads are real fine things, needles, leaves, grass, things like that. 10 hours is a little bit bigger, branch wood, you know, just a little bit larger. And then 100 hours, you're starting to look at logs and things like that. And, you know, we were burning in grass today, so we would have a measurement in there that we need to follow, but we didn't have any 10 and 100-hour fuels, so those would be blank for a grass fuel model. If you were doing understory.
I'm sorry, does this auto-populate based on other information you put in?
Negative.
Okay.
Negative.
So how far in advance are you filling out a burn plan to calculate all of your speed directions to forecast, to then fall short on your forecast on the day and cancel it and resubmit this?
No. No, we're setting the parameters are set. So when you look at a burn, when you look at what wind directions are acceptable.
This is just telling you the window to which you can.
Yes, this is the window. This is your prescription. Yep.
Tell us, or we tell you.
You would need to tell me. It is complex. It's a lot to understand, which is, you know, what we did today may have looked simple enough, but it's, when you're looking at understory and brush and tall, thick grass, you really need to understand this information. You need to understand how the temperature and relative humidity work together, and how when they work together, they decide what your fine dead fuel moisture is, and how the wind speeds are affecting what you're burning. There's a lot to understand there, and yep.
I was just going to ask, how to create a draft, the burn plan draft. Does it kind of go into further description on how to figure these things out, or different resources?
I have not read through Luke's, but yeah, yep. So yes, the parameters in the burn in this the people, the county offices, again, you can work with those, and they can help you with some of these numbers. Again, when you come in, we're judging. Do you know what you're doing? Like, we're not going to spoon feed you the information to put in there if we're not sure that you understand the information that we're giving you. So that when we want people to be able to burn, but they have to burn responsibly. And as a group and as a prescribed burn association, if we're conducting burns and they're getting out of control and the fire departments have to come handle them and we have to become involved, you know, at that point it starts to give it, that prescribed burning, a bad name if it's not being done responsibly.
I think what we're concerned about is, like, how long does it take to get a permit? And would we say, well, usually next month the wind speed
Right.
Usually in our area, the wind direction is,
Right.
that's all we could do.
So she's asking, how do you know what those parameters should be, like a month ahead of time or several months ahead of time? Like wind direction. So we know generally in our area, generally comes from the west or northwest, but we do get south and east, and it just depends. So when you're looking at wind direction, what is that affecting? That's affecting the hottest side of the fire. What are the fuels on the other side? It affects smoke direction. If you have a burn here, and then a quarter of a mile away or less, there's a chicken house, for instance. If you have your smoke direction going towards that chicken house, then you could create a problem with your smoke, and you're responsible for your fire and your smoke. So all this stuff works together, and it is.
Our preferred would be west.
Well, your preferred is going to depend on your site. It's very site specific. So if you have your property, right, and you have your field, if there's a house on the south side of it, you're not going to want a north wind blowing right straight into your neighbor's window. Yeah. So all these numbers are very specific to your site. You can't just write a prescription for every property, as a generic prescription. Very specific. Any other questions? I know that's difficult, and to go deep into this, we would be here for a week. So the smoke. So.
Can you just answer one more?
Yep.
Is there a timeline how far out you're supposed to submit?
Yeah, that's a good question. We prefer 2 months ahead of time. That gives me a chance to review it. I'll say that I try to stay on top of that. When people are, because there are things that are last minute. If you submit me a burn plan, you call me and say, hey, I submitted this, but I need to burn next week. If I can do it, I will, and I'll let you know. But if I can't get it, about 2 months is about right.
So just as a follow-up question to that specifically, on the previous page, it had last measurable precipitation on
Yep.
it. So if you're filing 2 months in advance,
Yep.
and you fall into a drought period after that, or say you file it during a drought period and you fall into a lot of rainfall after that, who is making the distinction that it can or cannot be approved? If you're approving it 2 months out, a lot can change in 2 months is my concern.
Right. So let's go with the drought side of it. You have the drought index, and we know when people start to have problems with ground fire and situations like that, and that index is going to determine that. So we know, that's a hard line that, around the drought index of 400, you're going to start to have problems no matter whatever you're burning. So this time of year, the drought index is usually pretty low. It's usually not a problem, but when it is a problem, you can't burn, and that's why we set the limit. There's a limit to being able to burn based off of whatever the conditions are. Like, we want you to burn when the drought index is below X. So it doesn't matter, you're not trying to guess what the weather is in a month or 2 months. You're just trying to set the parameters in which you can safely burn.
Yeah, I guess my confusion is just that it seems like the parameters for your maximum minimum would change based on those conditions.
Nope.
No.
Because what determines fire behavior? Fuels, weather, and topography. So your fuels,
Why
your...
is the minimum and maximum not just represented on the form?
Okay, that is a good question.
Right, because then it would tell me that I should be shooting for my preferred range within.
So the reason we did used to have a span, we just had the minimum and maximum. So this preferred window is the ideal conditions for what you want to burn. This is what your prescription is. Right. But there are days where you get where you would get like a lower relative humidity but no wind. So we've added a minimum and maximum so that when you're looking to burn, a lot of your stuff is preferred, but only 1 or 2 are in the maximum range. You know that the fire behavior is enhanced but not dangerous. If you're completely in the maximum, you're burning on the hot end of your prescription. Right. Conversely, if you're burning with all on the minimum, you're probably not going to meet your objectives to burn. But there are strict parameters that that, you know, all this stuff works together to influence the fine dead fuel moisture, the moisture that's in the fuel, the temperature and humidity and days since last rain, all that is affecting these numbers. And these numbers are what is determined if you're going to have moderate fire behavior that you control or extreme fire behavior that you probably can't control. And I need to know that the parameters of each, and it changes for grass to understory to logging slash. There is no cookie cutter that, you know, for that information. Yep.
Just kind of two-parter. It seems like there's a lot of specific experience that's required to kind of fill out this plan. Is
Yep.
there any type of like workshop or program where you can understand how things kind of?
There are a lot of training. There's training available online through the National Wildfire Coordination Group. There's the S190, which is basic wildland fire behavior. So that information will educate you on 10-hour fuels and fine dead fuels and how wind and temperature and humidity are affecting fires.
Yeah, I'll add that guide has each of these sections that Shannon's going through. We have like a paragraph of text describing what it's at. Some of our stuff comes from those sources, so it'll get you closer.
Yeah.
You might need to do some additional research, but and work these pros too. They'll help to check the work.
Okay, gotcha.
When you're going over a burn plan, before you approve it, are you going out to the property where the burn's going to happen?
No, but as part of the burn plan, you have to submit maps.
Gotcha.
And I'll look at the site, and in the next section, for instance, you know, we have humidity, wind speed, all that information. You need to be able to calculate the through the minimum and maximum preferred from above. You need to calculate the rate of spread and the flame length for a head fire and for backing fire. And there is a program, Behave Plus is a computer program that's free to download and use, and it has inputs and outputs. There's some YouTube training on how to use that program. It's not simple, but you can kind of figure out the basics of it to get the information that we were looking for there. Burn duration, estimated time. There we're going to be looking at if you had 200 acres of understory, do you have enough time to complete that in one day? Or is it going to go into nighttime? And if it's going to go into nighttime, you know, what are those considerations? So if you have big acreage, it's advantageous to split that up into smaller units to try and handle and burn smaller units.
I'm sorry, I want to ask another question.
Yep, you're good.
So, while we were out there today, I
Yep.
was asking the question, you know, what is the estimated burn time, you know, for this acre field when
Yep.
we're looking at it?
Yep,
And I was given the, it just varies based on conditions.
it does.
So, how is that correlating to you?
Experience,
I mean, you're essentially drawing out your imagined plan,
right?
but then you're just at the mercy of what goes on, assuming it was safe to burn that day.
Right.
It feels a little bit like nonsense, just to be completely honest.
Really?
Well, that I can ask somebody out in the field,
Yeah.
and they can't give me a projection on field,
Well, they know off of experience. They've burned.
so they should be able to fill this out.
Yeah.
Right. So in theory, by my asking them, they should be able to know that number.
Well,
based on experience, like
Yeah.
this will probably burn in 20 minutes.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Well, it would burn in 20 minutes with control lines like that, but say you went to
Well,
a
but that's
different,
in the burn
more
plan,
narrow, yeah. But if the control line is narrower, it's going to take longer to burn because you're going to have to go slower. And if that acreage is like today, under any circumstances, you could burn that in a few hours. If that was 1,000 acres, then I'm going to look harder. Does it need to be broken up into several areas so that you can burn in one day's period? That don't look like I answered that for you.
I didn't feel confident in the answer that you guys just gave me.
It's
You
experience.
didn't bring an example of today's burn plan with you to show us.
Right.
I think that has been really beneficial for us to see today's burn plan.
Right.
To understand how you're measuring parameters in real time.
You can have ours, yeah, ours is, I think the QR code, I think we have our burn plan on the QR code in the thing, so you can
Yep.
see what we put in. Yeah.
But it does kind of feel like a catch-22. You need experience to do it. We don't have experience, but if you don't, then we're not gonna let you do it.
Well, we're getting to get a little further. Again, prescribed burning is complex.
I'm not debating that. I'm
Yeah.
just saying my frustration with what I'm seeing based on the questions and answers I'm getting in the field are that here I need to know how quickly I expect something to burn.
Right.
When I literally asked somebody who's experienced in the field, their answer was it varies. Not based on the conditions today, I expect this will burn in 20 minutes or in 10 minutes.
I think generally speaking, we could have looked at that field and determined if you could have done it in 8 hours or not in 8 hours.
So you're just saying I didn't get an answer because I didn't corner somebody to give me a
Well,
answer.
I don't know who you asked.
I don't remember who I asked.
If you'd asked me, I'd have said you could do this in one day, so you could put 8 hours on there and you'd be fine. Oh, Lord. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. So, I mean, as you said, a lot of this stuff is complex, and it really, the average landowner is going to have difficulty coming up with this kind of stuff. But
Right.
let me ask you this: if we were going to conduct a prescribed burn for wildlife diversity or sapling control, whatever, and we requested assistance from,
You would get it.
can you get it?
Yeah.
All right.
Each county has a forestry office that you could go to, and they'll help you with this information.
Well, I'm talking about also helping in the field. Would you assist in the field?
No. Well, no. No. We could do it for you, but the state only has so much personnel and so much time to burn so many private landowners, which is why, like, that prescribed burn association is going to be important thing for you all. You work together to learn this information and to get your burns done.
So that would include like staff assistance from that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the forestry office isn't there to roadblock you from being able to burn. The forestry office is there for resource protection, to make sure that you are armed with the knowledge and experience to do the burn that you're planning to do. And this burn plan is standard for us, for the Nature Conservancy, for across the country. You can't burn without a burn plan. And it is complex, but fire behavior is complex, fire weather is complex, it's all complex. And you can't have the keys to a vehicle that you're not quite sure how to drive. And again, our standpoint is resource protection. So, wait a minute, there was one more question. Yep, go ahead.
So let's say you're just an individual with no experience, you want to gain the experience so you can conduct burns.
Yep.
What is the pathway to getting this experience?
So today's the first step. You come, you've gained some knowledge, we scratched the surface. This is some base information on how to move forward now. So now you need to gain the experience. The Prescribed Burn Association, again, is a group of landowners that with varying degrees of experience that are all going to be burning on each other's property, and you can go and gain that experience working with them. Yeah.
I'd like to add some other things. Like, there's a few different agencies as well, and Bob Long's back there. He's the quail upland game bird guy.
Yep.
So Wildlife and Heritage also does burns, mostly on their WMAs, but they can't commit to saying we will help all private landowners. But if you contact these guys and you say, hey, we want to do this, we're going to set this up, we've got disc lines, and you build a relationship, you work with them. They say, if we have openings, we can maybe fit you in. Now, I'm not speaking for you. I know
Right.
Bob mentioned that. They will work with private landowners, and they have done that in the past. So,
Yep.
And the Prescribed Burn Association is another avenue for experienced people to gain that too. But yeah, it is a chicken and the egg thing, which is something that people are talking about. But I need experience to do this. But how do I get experience without experience?
You can't conduct the burn if you're not a certified burn boss.
Correct.
Yeah.
But how do you,
Unless
you
it's
show
less-
up to this burn association, who is documenting your credit that you're spending time doing this?
It's being worked out in the bylaws how to do that. And I'll go over the law, like I haven't got to that part of it, but I'll talk about burn boss here in a second. So, equipment required on site. So this is what you're going to have there the day of the burn. We had the UTVs with suppression tanks. You could have a water tank for a supply source. You could have a portable pump that you could set up in a stream as a water source. Bladder bags, hand tools, first aid kits, the things that you need on site to safely conduct that burn. Control procedures, this is just how you're going to keep the fire under control, and generally that is done with your control lines and the amount of fire you're putting on the ground, and you're able to control the fire behavior. Mop-up procedures is when you're ready to clear that fire for the day, how much mop-up are you going to do? So for this grass burn we burned today, and because it's fine fuels and grass, it went out pretty quick. If we were doing an understory burn and the perimeter of the fire was still smoldering, there are logs and things that burn, generally we're looking for what are your standards, like how much of that perimeter are you going to completely extinguish before you leave it, like leave it for the day or for the night. So that's the mop-up procedures. Special precautions, is there anything in the burn itself that requires special attention? Are there telephone poles? Are there wooden bridges? What is in that burn that you need to consider that is gonna change the complexity or way that you're firing that burn? Contingency plan, and you have to imagine too, these plans are not just written for grass burns on flat ground. There are prescribed burns that they do, for instance, in Western Maryland that are a few hundred acres that include topography, and they are complex. So we need to know if that fire does go over the control line or it does spot, like what is your plan to control that? Are there roads above it? Have you put in leaf blower line above it in case it spots over? So that's what contingency planning is. Contingency resources are just generally like what is backup for your burn. It can be the Maryland Forest Service. In a lot of cases, that's what it is. If you had a problem and you were burning, you could call us. And just about all the time, if you were to get a fire that goes across the line, your contingency resource is going to be 911 in the local fire department. It could be the wildlife division if you're working with them. It could be a myriad of things. It could be other people in the prescribed burn association. Staffing post-burn plan, essentially what we're looking for there is these fires that are in logging slash or in understory that are smoldering for a long period of time. Are you going back in and checking that, making sure that the fire is completely secure before you call it out and done for that fire? Medical plan. This is just generally this is in here for the purpose of safety. And generally, if there are safety hazards present, you can list those, and then you can list the mitigations to mitigate that hazard. So it may be things like burns from fire or refueling drip torches, and the mitigation would be to bring the drip torches away from the fire before refueling. And basically, this is, if it's predictable, it's preventable. Where are they going to meet you at? If applicable, landing zone location. And remember, again, these are for low complexity and high complexity burns. It's a burn plan that fits all that. So for a landing zone for you, it's just going to be determined for a landowner. It's just going to be whatever the fire department or EMS decides. if we're burning on the side of Dan's Mountain, we may have a predetermined landing zone that we would take somebody if they were to be injured. Burn crew organization. Today we lined out who the burn bosses were, who the firing boss and holding boss is. The burn boss is the person who is in charge of the fire, and the qualifications for a burn boss currently is for non-agency, for non-Forest Service. For our own personnel, the criteria is much higher before you can step into that position. For non-agency personnel, it is having attended the 2-day prescribed burn workshop, 16 hours, and 3 years of experience. You could also have 5 years of experience and have not attended the workshop. So either one of those suffice. The firing boss and holding boss, there are no criteria for the qualification on that. And there may be circumstances on lower complexity burn where the burn boss is holding all of these positions. You don't necessarily need a different person for each one of them. You could have one person handling all that. And this excerpt is taken from the regulation of what is required for a burn boss. Pre-burn notifications, we talked earlier about notifying your neighbors if you're burning, whoever. This is for your benefit. I don't get overly critical. Whoever is directly adjacent to what you're burning, you would want to have listed there. This part is critical. Your air quality officer for the county, the fire manager, which would again be me for Eastern and Southern, land manager, this is for state burns, and ESA, again for state burns. Notifications the day of the burn, the county 911 center, we called them before and after we burned today to let them know what we were doing, so if it got turned in, you know, they're not tying up emergency resources coming out to the fire. And then your local forestry office. So if you let your forestry office know the day you're burned, they see the smoke column. They're not gonna come looking either. And attachments, some of these are optional, some of them are necessary. You know, we need a map of the fire that has the burn units on it, that shows the different fuel types. Aerial photography works great for that. Again, that 1 mile smoke impact map, 5 mile smoke impact map, contingency map is optional. The pre-ignition go, no go checklist, and these are all attachments that are right a part of this package. And the go, no go is just asking all the necessary questions. Are you in the parameters of your burn plan? Do you have the personnel you said you were going to have? Have you made all the notifications? Yeah. So, and then again, other stuff that is helpful. Prescribed burn agreement is just for the Maryland Forest Service, so that's not applicable to you all. And then the prescribed burn evaluation, which is not mandatory for private landowners, but recommended. And these are just those attachment documents. And again, Luke will have these available. This is the prescribed burn reporting. You can do it with a QR code that takes you to the program, or if this is downloaded, they have the link that you can click on for reporting.
What type of tracking is there? Because I can understand, like, how do you track that this person has that type of experience if there's no necessarily, like, you're tracking hours, or you, like, worked on a specific crew under this portion for this season? Like, how do you justify that?
That is a good question, and you know, I didn't write the law, yeah, but I follow it, and right now there is no definition of what makes up a year of experience.
Gotcha. And like, who's tracking is it? Is it mainly, from what it seems like, just like you get an impression of how much experience someone has based, yep, off of just this back and forth of talking with them, specifically like understanding the interactions of all, yep, these different factors, and like you can understand if someone knows what they're talking about
When they submit the plan, I can usually look at it pretty quick, and if the numbers aren't lining up and nothing is, I can usually tell pretty quick that and I don't get a lot of them.
Yeah.
And again, we're not trying to block you. We're trying to help you get this path to get where you need to go.
Yeah.
So that local forestry office will work with you to get you from A to B. And there are circumstances where we will take volunteers to help us burn. That's not across the board because their liability and each I would say that's case by case.
Yeah.
But again, we're here as a service to kind of get you from A to B and safely. Yep.
So is the forestry office going to be your connection to find a network of burn bosses that you could hire to do this with you?
There are you mean to pay somebody to do your?
I can't fill this out and go burn this because I don't have the credential to be a burn boss.
Right.
So as a property owner, I would need to employ somebody, at least in that capacity. So how does a landowner find a burn boss to come work with them to work through this process?
That's
I point you to the prescribed. Sorry, I'm over here. The Prescribed Burn Council is a good resource. The Prescribed Burn. If you're on the Eastern Shore, Prescribed Burn Association. They also know. They know these networks, right? So Chase McLean over there. He's I think the director. He's leading that effort. He's plugged into the whole network, so you can find contractors and things like that.
Yep.
We are coming up on lunch. One final question. One last question. And then we're going to do lunch.
Sure.
And then I'll leave you alone.
That's all right.
So is the burn boss the one filing the plan, or is the property owner filing the plan?
It can be either or somebody. It could be the land manager. I'm just looking at the plan. It may come from anybody as long as it's written and everything lines up, and it has a qualified person there. That's all I'm looking for. We're strictly resource protection. I'm not looking to make it hard for somebody to do something. I want to lead them to the right way to do it.
And I think there are also ways there are ways in which people can pay the Forest Service a fee to also get burning done.
They
but there's
can.
a certain limited capacity.
And I will say we do our absolute best to do that for landowners and to get to everything. We have pretty limited staff, but we work pretty diligently with landowners to do burning for them. And wildlife probably does the same.
I found like many things in life, a lot of things are relationships. So it's meeting people like this, meeting Bob Long, talking to people. You get plugged into the
My
networks.
personal concern is having property in CRET. We are within parameters on, let's talk about Canada thistle. We're within parameters on how they want it sprayed, who they want to spray it, and who has approved to spray it under their list. It's not just any registered applicant can come in and do it. But because there's so much tension on the system, by the time you get a person out, you've often missed the window to do the spray because you've gotten a seed already. So what benefit is to come in and spray that for? So working through CREP again is why I'm interested to know, if somebody is not working for the Forestry Service, who is acting as a fire boss, how do I find this person?
Well,
especially if I'm not located on Maryland Eastern.
Sure. Yeah, contact any of us. We'll be able to get you in touch.
And the local forestry office, those guys know, who work. There's a very limited number of people that work local, but their companies have, networks themselves and people that work seasonal for them, and they bring them on. And in a lot of cases, it's probably wildland firefighters that are generally in the summer out fighting fire.
Well, let's thank Shannon. Thank you so much. There is a lot that goes into this. Not easy. And it took us a lot to develop our guide.